What therapists are telling trauma survivors after leaving Neverland. K.L Randis, an author and sexual abuse survivor, said she had knots in her stomach while watching much of Leaving Neverland, a two-part HBO documentary in which James Safechuck Wade Robson detail allegations of sexual abuse against Michael Jackson. There were knots when the two men spoke of how having sons was the catalyst for them to come forward with their claims. Imagining the same thing happening to their boys was not only unbearable, but also reminded them of their own innocence as children, innocence they say was stolen by Jackson in the late 1980s and early 90s. Randis, the author of Spilled Milk, a novel inspired by her own sexual abuse, looks at her daughters, ages 6 and 4, now and thinks the same thing. "It's hard to imagine my father making the conscious decision to abuse me," she told HuffPost. James said he didn't have sympathy for himself as a child, and I agree. "I see myself in my daughters, and it pains me to know I was the same sweet child who just trusted the world I grew up in as normal." Moments like those that Randis experienced through the documentary of feeling seen and reliving the fallout of sexual abuse have been happening often since the film debuted on HBO on March 3, said Silva Neves, a London-based psychotherapist who specializes in sexual trauma therapy. So many of Robson and Safechuck's experiences are resonating with people being made to feel special and loved by an abuser, being told that the abuse is a way of showing love and that if they told anyone, there would be terrible consequences for them, Neves said. It's a heavy documentary for anyone, which is why mental health counselors were reportedly on hand for audiences at an early screening of it at the Sundance Film Festival in Utah in January. If you've experienced sexual trauma, there are a few things you should know before watching the doc. Below, Randis, Neves and other trauma therapists share the topics they're discussing with their clients in the wake of the film. Depending on your stage of healing, the documentary may or may not be for you, said Robert Cox, a therapist in Richmond, Missouri, who specializes in sexual trauma. He said he has recommended that a few of his patients avoid seeing it. While one trauma survivor might find it cathartic and akin to group therapy to revisit their experiences through Safechuck's and Robson's stories, it might be unsettling for others. Often in doing trauma work, reliving the experience can be re-traumatizing, he said. It can push you into a dissociative state and further traumatize them. So it really becomes a case-by-case thing. Safechuck and Robson, who were 10 and 7, respectively, when the alleged abuse started, were slow to tell their families about it. Later in life, they both dismissed the idea of therapy, and Robson said he covered up the sexual nature of his relationship with Jackson when he finally did go. Watching the documentary and a follow-up interview with Oprah Winfrey on HBO and OWN, you get the sense that Robson has made more progress with unpacking what he went through. Safechuck admits he has a long way to go. Their willingness to talk it through is a vital lesson for trauma survivors, Neves said. Some survivors think back, quote, I can't make sense of it myself. How can I start a conversation about it with someone else? He said. Both James and Wade said that it was easier not to talk about it, because they couldn't make sense of it. But it's common for survivors of abuse not to have a coherent narrative, or for them to have some memories missing or parts of their story they doubt. That's okay, Neves said. A counselor or survivor advocate can still offer support, and maybe even supply you with the language to talk about it.